G'day, Ancient Mahari here. Do you feel like the person that you were with BPD, whether that's a significant other relationship or a family member, a sibling, you're the adult child of somebody with BPD, whatever relationship type, do you feel like you were just a prop for the person with BPD in your life or who was in your life to validate their identity? Were you just a prop for that? Is that how you feel in an emotional, intrapersonal way? So that dysfunctional relationship to and with self, intrapersonal. It's about you and your relationship to yourself that isn't functional or healthy to begin with before you get into the interpersonal relationship, which involves somebody with BPD in any relationship type, and often in families, etc. I mean, it's just there, it just happens, it's not chosen. And so relationships for people with codependency with people with BPD that are significant other, they are chosen relationships. And the key thing that you need to know as a codependent today is you can unchoose it. Not only can you unchoose it, though that may feel impossible and be extremely painful and traumatizing, you are being traumatized. You have been re-traumatized because you're carrying trauma from your childhood. So it's really important that you know that in spite of whatever the person with BPD in your life in any relationship type has done, the way they behave, how much they hurt you, etc., not excusing any of that. All you can do about any and all of that in your own life, as you've been the prop for the validation of the identity of the person with BPD, and or you've been the bad object other after being the good idealized other, or that happens on and off and on and off. Here's what you need to know if you have codependency today, without a shadow of a doubt, that everything that's happened to you, how much pain you're in, etc., many people with untreated BPD, they're going to hurt and traumatize you quite a bit, and these are trauma bonds. And the fact that they are trauma bonds, what's that really mean? Well, it's not just the person with BPD coming at you to somehow get you, seduce you, infect you. None of this is true. But they're seeking what they're seeking out of their own defense and lack of self. And people with codependency are there with their own lack of self in a different way to varying degrees. But you are one half of the trauma bond. That's what you need to take responsibility for. Not what the person with BPD did, not how they traumatized or wounded you, but to focus and continue to think about the person with BPD is to keep on ignoring yourself, as I've said before, is to keep on abandoning yourself. So you have this dysfunctional relationship to and with self in the intrapersonal, okay, inside yourself, before you even get to the relational, interpersonal, trying to relate to somebody with BPD. And why are you there? Why did that happen? Well, the why is the least important question to answer, though it feels the most compelling, but it has all to do with the fact that you have codependency. And let's just go a little deeper on what that means. So there are some people out there, some professionals that refer to codependency as codependent personality disorder. That has not been made official. I hope it never will be, because it would just be more the same pathologizing as what people with BPD go through. And I'm not here to apologize for anybody's traumatizing anybody else. But this is not all one-sided trauma. And this is what people with codependency need to learn. Because the reason that you get with somebody with BPD, it's not magical, it's not accidental, but it's not in your conscious awareness either. So codependency is, at least at this stage, and I don't want to see it pathologized, a group of personality traits or personality characteristics. And so what does that mean? Well, it's because there's an overlap between codependency and BPD. Not everybody with codependence has BPD, but everybody with BPD has codependence. And these two things, codependency and the false self and codependency, BPD and the false self, lack of self in the person with BPD untreated, are much more similar than people are comfortable thinking about, but I'm not saying it's the same. So people with codependency, you have, whether you're aware or not, you have cognitive, emotional, and behavioral patterns that affect your ability to have a healthy, mutually satisfying relationship with yourself and with others. So it's not exactly the same as the person with BPD untreated, but it's similar territory of levels and gradations of trauma in childhood. And so many maladaptive patterns within externalizing out patterns within codependency, where people do not want to feel or deal with their own pain. But codependency is also known as a relationship addiction because people, the characteristics of codependency form or maintain the unhealthy relationship, the trauma bond. And these trauma bonds and unhealthy, toxic relationships, both ways for both sides, are often one sided in the sense that the person with codependency is going to even experience more trauma. The person with BP is going to keep recycling their trauma. The person with codependency may experience more trauma on top of what is already childhood trauma. So, some of the signs and characteristics of codependency: hyper aware of other people's problems and needs. So, you become a caretaker, you are a caretaker, controlling, advice giving, over worrying about others, all to the detriment of yourself, by the way, but you're not so consciously aware of that, many people, if you resonate with this, with codependency. Another characteristic of codependency is people in their own way with codependency can be rather demanding, have their own needs to try to have satiated externally, but you're kind of ignoring those more than you're looking to get them satiated in any way that can happen with a person with BPD or a narcissist. You want things to be done a certain way, often, many codependents do. And many codependents might resort to telling others, how to do this or that or the other thing, and especially emotionally and etc. Codependent characteristics can be hypercritical of others because they often can't and won't live up to your expectations. People with codependence can have high expectations and also makes it harder for people with codependency to ask for help from others, but that's also something that happens in childhood. Another characteristic codependency: stressed out or anxious when things don't go exactly and perfectly as planned because you're lacking emotional safety yourself. And that is not something you can just say is the borderline or the narcissist's fault, because this is something that is within people with codependency as well from childhood. Many people with codependency characteristics include hyper focused on predictability, structure, and certainty, things you probably didn't have to one degree or another in your childhood or your family of origin. Being self-critical. People with codependency have very active internalized critic, which is very much the self-talk is negative. And in people with codependency, maybe not aware of your self-talk, and then that can get enmeshed with, in a way, with the person with BPD. And I'm not trying to absolve people with BPD of their responsibility, but people with codependency are not knowing enough about all of these characteristics that you're carrying and things that are going on for you, along with what's happening or what you think is happening from the person with BPD. And lots happens from the person with BPD in a trauma sense, but you're already, to one degree or another, with codependency, a traumatized individual. And it does vary. Not everybody with BPD is the same. Not everybody with codependency is the same. So the negative self-talk is based on negative core beliefs, which are often not in the consciousness of those with codependency. So unless you seek that healing and recovery journey to learn all this and know yourself better and find more of yourself and not be living through the codependent false self. I'm out here to help you if any of this resonates with you, if I resonate with you. People with codependency are very self-critical because of low self-esteem and the harsh criticism that you received in your childhood at one point or another. People with codependency feel responsible for everything and everyone, even other people's happiness, but at the same time denying your own happiness and your own needs. Lots of people with codependency, the people pleaser syndrome, you're afraid to upset or disappoint others, but this leads you to overgiving, overcaring, self-abandonment, kind of re-traumatizing yourself in a sense in the interpersonal dysfunctional relationship to and with yourself before you even deal with the interpersonal, what's going on, how you're externalizing out and trying to rescue somebody else at the cost of yourself. People with codependency can be dependable and responsible. You want to be the one that people can always count on, and you feel guilt, which is toxic guilt, if you don't follow through, even if you might be like sick in bed or something, but they need you for something and they need something, and the heck with your needs. Boundary issues are aplenty for people with codependency. So you likely have trouble speaking up for yourself. You likely have trouble saying no. You often, people with codependency, allow people to mistreat them, abuse them, take advantage of their kindness, of their love. And codependent love is not a lot healthier than people with BPD, but it's not the same. And a lot of people with codependency are extremely conflict avoidant. You have insecure attachment, not secure attachment. You'll ignore your own feelings and needs, often suppressing them, denying them, avoiding them, or numbing them out. And this occurs at a conscious level, but not. Some people know a little bit. Some people aren't really that conscious of how much you're abandoning yourself, which is a repetition compulsion of how you were abandoned in childhood at one time or another, emotionally, one way or another. People with codependent characteristics have a lot of self-defeating behaviors of their own. And your happiness, if you're a codependent, is dependent on, externalized out to other people, be it a friend, be it the person with BPD, whether a family member, what significant other, whatever relationship type. Just as an example, if your partner's in a good mood, then you can relax a little bit. But if they're not, you can't, because people with codependency also have a lack of boundary between self and other. Maybe not to the same extent as people with BPD who are untreated. But you have a hard time as a codependent, whether you're aware of it or not, separating yourself from other people's feelings, needs, and experiences. Because you got highly attuned to the needs, the feelings, and etc. of a parent or both parents for whatever constellation of reasons or issues. And so people with codependency define themselves in relation to others. So do you feel like a prop just to validate the identity of the person with BPD, because they're using you for that identity validation and to establish identity for themselves, but they don't know that consciously. But you sign up for that, regardless of the fact of the way it comes with idealization and the intensity and the honeymoon phase, all of which people with codependency have no boundaries against, don't understand what's happening, fair enough. But you're primed for this because it is all, or perceived to be all, that you have never received or known before in your life because of childhood woundedness and the codependent characteristics that kind of rather define you, unless you get into a healing recovery journey and get through that, which involves many steps and many layers, family of origin work, inner child healing, self-differentiation, and more. And it's not as simple as just meditating or, it's not just a 1, 2, 3, 5 step process. People with codependent characteristics have a lot of emotional pain from childhood and then get re-traumatized. And shame wounds are huge for people with BPD and for people with codependency. And that pain gets really buried in the subconscious. It can manifest in a latent way, and it can manifest with anger and rage, and yes, even for some people with codependency. People with codependency feel guilty and ashamed, and guilt and shame are the roots of low self-worth and low self-esteem. Another codependent characteristic, you probably feel there's something wrong with you, or you're wondering about that right now, but you do have a false self. You don't have a healthy relationship to and with yourself, let alone can you do that with anyone else, be they borderline or not. Perhaps someone told you this directly, or you might have come to this conclusion based on how you've been treated. But many people with codependency will continue to minimize their own problems and sensitivity and ignore their own needs and abandon themselves. So some people with codependency get into being a martyr or a saint or a savior and taking care of everyone else, giving without receiving, and then feeling angry and resentful for being taken advantage of by others. So there's a lack of personal responsibility in many people with codependency for not realizing that no matter what somebody else does, or to have BPD and how they hurt you, you have to take responsibility for the fact that you've been giving without receiving and might feel angry or taken advantage of after the fact. Some people with codependency are highly passive aggressive. There can be reactive anger, resentments build up over time. You might be experiencing that you're getting quite angry or exploding over what are kind of rather trivial matters, but that's hard to really measure because a lot of people with codependency are always minimizing any feelings of their own anyways. You feel shame and guilt And so you might overcompensate by being sort of like a Pollyanna do-gooder. People with codependency often overwork, overschedule themselves because you're trying hard to prove your self-worth or distract yourself from low self-esteem and other painful feelings. People with codependent characteristics are very avoidant of their own pain, and that's why those healing recovery journeys are so important for you if you have codependency. Intimacy and trust are difficult for people with codependency because you didn't have role models for healthy relationships in childhood, to one degree or another, and more often than not. And in adulthood, you are likely being betrayed in a relationship with a person with BPD or a narcissist, but staying anyways, or hey, wanting to get back in after they've ghosted you, wanting to start all over and go around the cycle all over again. People with codependency characteristics, afraid of anger, criticism, rejection, failure. You want to, quote, play it safe, and yet you're throwing yourself to the wolves, so to speak. But you're trying to become invisible in a way with your own needs, trying to externalize and meet the borderline's needs. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, sometimes clinical levels of anxiety or depression, and generalized anxiety disorder for people with codependency. And you probably have or have had ongoing or reoccurring episodes of physical problems manifesting from all the stress. Codependency personality traits are developed in childhood. So during infancy through childhood, adolescence is when personality is forming. The core of the personality is formed between the age of 5 to 7. And those years that follow are sort of add-on of characteristics and traits. Codependency developed during those important formative years as a way to cope with trauma of any kind. Many people with codependency grew up in a family with mental illness, family of addiction, a family dysfunctional family of origin, or other problems in the family of origin, maybe a codependent parent, maybe a cluster B parent, emotionally unavailable parent or parents. Other individuals with codependency traits appear on the surface level to have had seemingly normal childhoods, but codependency traits and behavior patterns were passed down unknowingly by parents. So, and they could have been, like I said, codependent. And so many people with codependency have buried so deeply the wounding or painful memories of childhood, and it becomes like an amnesia, and therefore it's stored in the subconscious. And I'm just going to say a little bit about codependency amnesia because it's very much the case for people with codependency, and it happens in childhood. It's from emotional neglect or distant parents emotionally, didn't meet your emotional needs, lack of emotional safety, parents that were inconsistent in providing nurture or love, or it might have been absent, emotional or verbal abuse, threats or name calling, the silent treatment. Some people are physically abused. It can also be sexual abuse for people with codependency. And physical abuse includes pinching, slapping, scratching, hair pulling, spanking, being pushed around. Sexual abuse, by the way, includes anything said about your gender, anything said about your private area, anything said about you as like you develop that's negative to if you're a female or a male is sexual abuse. And often parents deny that their behavior was harmful to people who have codependency, and they'll claim it was not abuse because, hey, you don't have any bruises on you. You didn't. You had a roof over your head. You got fed. Maybe you played baseball and we did this, that, and the other for you. It's in your emotional landscape that people with codependency do not have a functional, healthy relationship to and with self. That's the intrapersonal versus the interpersonal. And so codependent traits are hallmarks for relationship problems of all kinds. They are hallmarks for people with codependency getting into toxic relationships of all kinds, not just with cluster B, but other kinds too. The pain of being abused, lied to, cheated on, monkey branch, neglected, ignored, cursed at, made to feel invisible, invalidated, and even more. It's in your wounded inner child, and to different degrees for people with codependency, this is familiarity. But in your conscious mind with codependent amnesia, no, it's not familiarity at all. It's like, what is going on here? And then comes the fear, the obligation, and the guilt. That's the fog of the confusion of the entire situation at minimum. And it's way worse than that because it's a trauma bond. And most people with codependency do have a love addiction. Most people with codependency don't know how to be alone. Most people with codependency have such negative core beliefs. Like, if I'm not in a relationship, I don't matter. If I'm not in a relationship and my friends are, there's something wrong with me and I have to be in a relationship. The key point of codependency traits represent one's difficulty in loving, accepting, trusting, and being a true self within yourself first. Codependency is not your fault, but it's also your responsibility. Just like people with BPD, it's not their fault why they have BPD, but it's their responsibility now to do something about it. You didn't cause it, your codependency. You became codependent as a way to adapt to an unhealthy childhood. But as an adult, when you have codependency traits and characteristics, it causes you problems and gets in the way of you having a happy, healthy relationship with or to yourself, let alone with or to others. So you didn't cause the origin of the infant, child, adolescent survival adaptations to the family of origin, the family environment, but you're the only one who can change your codependent characteristics now. Working with someone like myself out here probably resonate with you, but working with somebody who knows what they're talking about, you are now responsible to heal, nurture, and take care of your wounded inner child and yourself. So codependency is serious business, and many people minimize it, and you don't realize that the more you focus on the borderline, the more you focus on the ex, the more you focus on whomever, the worse you feel, the more you think that you wouldn't be being you if you did this or that. There's a false self that is strongly embedded in each person with codependency, extreme loss of authentic self, and the healing and recovery journey is finding your way back to a self that you haven't fully really ever known in your own right, and coming home to that self for the first time in your life. Hope that was helpful, and take care.